Veysel Bey, bu içimizi karartan çok güzel sunumunuz için teşekkür ederim.
Thank you, Dr. Veysel, for this great and unfortunate presentation. Hello, how are you? Good morning. Today, I would like to thank all our stakeholders for being here and not leaving us alone. I would like to thank all the stakeholders who are also following this meeting through the internet. And I'd like to wish you a very good day. And I'd like to thank SteelOrbis team, Murat, Melis, and all our crew from the Erdemir group. You've done a brilliant job once more bringing us together. Thank you once more for such a great organization. With the SteelOrbis team, we've started this journey 7 years ago. In 2010, we started supporting the Turkish Steel Conference series, and since then, we have been always contributing after Dr. Veysel's presentations. I thought last night, 7 years in steel sector, 7 years, as you know, there are 7-year cycles in the steel sector, steel industry. So how was our 7 years? I thought about that, and our colleagues put up a video of what has been mentioned in the past 7 years. Well, the traces are the same traces, and the headlines are very similar too. Difficulties, challenges, crises, reductions, hopes, expectations, successes, achievements, failures. Years have gone by. Well, the headlines or the titles may be similar, but what we have lived through have always been quite distinctive. Well, the most important thing is the human factor. What I have realized is the faces are the same faces and nobody has aged. Amazingly, especially Dr. Veysel, I'd like to congratulate you. You have never changed at all, and same for Mesut. So while I was watching them, I actually said, wow, they have not aged a single day. So after all this, hopefully you will listen to my presentation. Well, the steel industry is what never changes and what actually keeps its soul intact, and the youngest, most dynamic, most energetic industry is the steel sector, and there's a bright future, and I thoroughly believe that. And this is not just steel producers. We're talking about mainstream producers. We're talking about our clients who purchase the steel and turn them or convert them into different products. A lot of new investments have been into this industry recently. There are things that have been done, there are things that have been conducted, that will be conducted, and this shows the hope for the future. This shows the hope for the Turkish market. And we have to say that there are always crises, there are always challenges, but there's always hope. And a good line says that if you don't want perfection, you can't survive being good. So we could look at the steel industry, and in Turkey we have a lot of stakeholders and companies who are actually taking part in international competition, and the steel industry is doing just that, and it's protecting its existence. And we believe that these presentations are very valuable every single year. What kind of a different perspective could we have to continue improving? As you know, and as you have probably guessed, I thought that Veysel would be giving us numbers. So rather than giving numbers about the steel industry, I'd like to talk about some questions coming from clients. Last few months, something is happening on the globe, and it affects the steel industry, they say. So I have actually prepared a presentation based on these questions. What's happening on the globe? What's happening in the global steel industry? What do the data show us? What do our analyses show us? And what can we look through a different perspective in the global market? Well, the expectations are getting better. Talked about 7-year cycles, and we have just closed one last year, and looking at the steel consumption in the world, it's possible to divide these cycles into different sections. Well, these sections have some mutual and dominant traits. Between 2000 and 2007, for example, we could say that this was a rapid rise, rapid hike period. Globalization was at its peak, and the the sources people had increased, and also the growth rate was high. This continued after 2008. Between 2008 and 15, there was a serious recession in the beginning, and something similar happened in 2015, and in between the recovery time. And between 2016 to 2021, the period that we are in started, and we could say that we're talking about a cautious recovery, or let's say a fragile hope is the key, or are the key words for this section. There's a serious difference here. In 2000 we started by globalization, and by 2015 it has turned into a protective, localized approach, not just for the steel industry. The main approach is preserving what we have, and we know that the global trade has gone slightly weaker, and this could be seen as a key reason in the lack or loss of speed of the global growth, and the world economic growth has actually stagnated, and the economies seem to be focused on improving themselves locally, and we can't really expect a serious difference in the steel industry. Steel industry is also going on its journey to become a regional industry. So what is changing in the global economy? Well, questions have been asked about the last few months, I said, and mostly 2015 was a very difficult year and a year of crisis, and most sectors lived through that. And in 2015 everything hit rock bottom, and in 2016 we started with a pressure, and the expectations indicators were showing rock bottom. And you know, the irony of life, we can only live to the future by reflecting on the past, and looking back to 2015, it was a very difficult year, and it was very similar to 2008, which was a majestically hard year, let's say. And in 2016 there was still hope in the beginning, and that hope actually sort of materialized, because it was heading to an hazardous point, and countries started taking cautions and remedies to sort the situation out. And in many regions in the world, in the second half of 2016, indicators have started to move upwards. And the PMI index, for example, is or has just increased. And looking at the global PMI, for the first time it moved up to 52, and for the first time since January 2015, and this was the numbers or figures declared in October. And looking at the United States, in the USA things are getting better. The PMI value in the US has actually increased. The growth is back on track. Unemployment has decreased. The wholesale numbers have increased. There seems to be a structural recovery in the United States. And looking at China, in the second half of the year, the recovery seems to be in place, which is crucial. And the slowdown of economic growth in China was something very difficult, and the whole world couldn't absorb that. Now, everybody was talking about how the world could manage that if the growth rate fell below 6.5%. Now, the world has accepted it, and China is not regressing anymore, and China is now stable. and it's actually going over the expectations slightly, but it's something. And looking at the European zone, Eurozone, we can talk about the expectations of the year being achieved in the second part of the year. Okay, what else then? We have some crucial indicators, for example, in developed countries, the construction sector in those countries. In the United States, the construction allowances since 2008 crisis has reached its peak. In the European Union, when we look at the housing pricing index, it's also reached its peak since 2008. And looking at the Baltic Dry Index, I said the beginning of 2016 was very problematic. Well, yes, but it's now gone much better. It's now doing much better and recovered. These are obviously minor markers. Yes, but the expectation is now so paramount that in 2017, the Globe is saying that 2017, I actually hope it will be a much better year than 2016 based on the indicators. So we are actually now all purchasing these expectations and these hopes.
Peki, gelişmiş ülkeler bunlar.
Okay, what about China then? China is very crucial, and in my presentation today I'll talk about China a lot. And most of the indicators here seem to be showing some correlations with China, and looking at the criteria of recovery, looking at the Producers Pricing Index in China, this was an index that was on the decrease for 55 months on the trot, and this was obviously, this reached its peak after 55 months. It's not decreasing anymore, it's not going down anymore. And looking at looking at the Chinese numbers, the previous situation was bringing us inflation, now it's not. And looking also at the railway volume in China was on the decline for the last 3 years until August 2016, which started increasing again. And this shows that in China there seems to be recovery in terms of economic activity, and economics was again, or hit rock bottom again, and the government took the necessary measures, and there was a serious increase in the non-current asset investments. And what happened when this took place? Obviously there was an injection of confidence in the Chinese economy, and the non-current assets were supported by the state, and this obviously meant for a much more stable economy in China. Now, how does the state help to get the economy back on track? Obviously by putting more money into the market. Now, it has a serious effect on the construction market. The increase in housing prices obviously helped the sector to recover, and we know that there seems to be small steps of increment in the Chinese market in terms of purchasing. Now, this obviously hopefully will make China a much more stable economic force. These are all crucial because China consists of the 16% of the world economy, same as the US. So these two countries altogether actually form 1/3 of all world economics. And one of the economists was talking about it last year. Think of the world if US and China grow 4 and 6% respectively, and what the world will look like. Now, growth of China and the US is crucial, and when we look at the rationale behind the improvement of the real estate, China and the United States have put more money into the market, and the commodity and goods have now become a little bit more expensive so that the demand could increase. We're talking about a budget, a serious budget here, and looking at all these expectations, the world thinks that the commodity and good prices will increase, the American economy will liven up, and that's what we expect for 2017. And that's our inference. Looking at other prices for goods, now we're talking about the same thing here. This is the LME index about the metals. End of 2015, it was again rock bottom. And since the beginning of 2016, the trend shows an upward trajectory. In copper, aluminum, and zinc, there seems to be a market increase. The crucial thing here is dollar has seriously gained value recently, and if you look at the goods markets, if this is happening, the goods and commodities are also gaining value at the same rate. It's not really interesting. This is showing us that the growth is back on track. There's a serious growth expectation for the near future, and if the dollar is on the rise, then the prices for goods and commodities also are on the rise. That's the correlation. So these are the main things to speak about economy. And since the second half of 2016, there seems to be a serious but fragile improvement. And going into 2017, we are enjoying a much more positive environment of hope, let's say. What about the steel industry? We're going to talk about some very similar things. If you look at the graph on the bottom left, shows us once more how 2015 proceeded as one of the hardest years we've seen so far. Even in 2008 crisis, the capacity consumption rates were not below 70%, but in 2015, as you see, the capacity usage rates were hanging around 68-67% for a long period. As I said, there's a cautious increase in this rate, and the reason for that is that the consumption is not decreasing. Last year, steel consumption decreased about 3%. This year's expectation is a slight increase, and this is very good news, because looking at the globe, looking at the Chinese, German or American markets, where they actually comprise half of the production market, manufacturing market in the world, and they're consuming 60% of steel, and their consumption of steel decreased 6% when they moved from 2014 to 15. Looking at this year, from 15 to 16, in that period, that was a slight increase, around 1%. So this shows us that there's actually a ladder that is going up. Now, how tall is that ladder? How high is that ladder? We don't know yet. But since the beginning of the presentation, I've been telling you that these are the expectations, and these show the expectations of hope for 2017, and the world is not as bad as it was back in end of 2015. Looking at the Chinese steel industry, which comprises half the world, is crucial. Now, the capacity usage rate is very similar. In 2015, it hit rock bottom. In 2016, there was an increase. And looking at the estimates for the future years, near future years, it seems to be on the rise. Now, how this happened was in 2015, capacity decreased, consumption decreased, and there was a serious surplus of supply, and they failed to manage the exports, and the high exports continued in the first 6 months of 2016. And as the non-current asset investments moved in and employment numbers increased, the Chinese export of steel started to decrease as of August. And what we see here is China has now taken some structural cautions and measures, and it's now in place. And we found a report about the non-current assets and investments, and 1.6 trillion yuan is the total investment expected for non-current assets, and 4.4 trillion of yuan is also underway, and 6.5 trillion yuan of investment for non-current assets have also been planned for the future. So, until 2020, Chinese consumption or Chinese growth doesn't seem to go down by any means. So this plateau is expected to continue, which has a positive effect on the consumers. So how this happened? There was the capacity surplus in China, and we were always talking about how competitive and how difficult that market was, and the Chinese producers kept producing. Step by step, China actually declared these and continued doing or taking the steps, and they have actually declared a new policy about reshaping of the steel industry in China last year. And in the beginning of the year, China said it's going to shut down 45 million tons of steel and 250 million tons of coal production. But when we look at last week, looking at the National Reform Bureau of China, they said we have achieved it and we've done it. 250 million tons of coal and 45 million tons of steel capacity have been shut down, they said. And their main target was to increase the coal up to 500 million tons, and that's the target. So what has changed then? We were always saying that the local administrations and the central government's policies may clash with each other in China. That's what we used to say. So to continue the employment, they continued producing steel, even if they weren't making any profit, and the local administration's performance targets were measured on the shut down capacities, so facilities. So the central government now saying that our main goal or our main marker is not employment. So what happens here is that the local authorities are declaring a shutdown of total capacity, and it's actually higher than what was initially calculated by the central government of China. So then the question I ask is, the production did not decrease, so why doesn't it decrease if the capacity has been shut down in given numbers? These are the zombie facilities that we've been talking about. They were really losing a lot of money, they were in the red, and then when the prices went up, they started to profit. Now those facilities have been shut down in coal and in steel markets. This is a very important step taken by China. Now, it's difficult to talk about China very clearly anytime, because these are the questions, these are the answers to the questions of why the world keeps changing. And looking at the targets declared by the state, looking at the market share of the first or top 10 steel producers in China, their market share will go up to 60%. So it shows us that they have a pricing policy, they're going to have an administrative approach in which 10 main producers of steel will comprise more than 60% of the market. So the zombie facilities will be closed down and will continue to be closed down. Well, the world actually sort of forced China to do that. Looking at OECD, there were serious meetings about this, and we have actually signed a serious petition and it was sent to China. The European Union have done some very surprising moves, and even European Union who believes in the free market or liberal market, they have become or let's say undertaken a protective approach, and even the the dumping margins were recalculated, and all these forced European Union to become the most protective market. So they have declared the taxation figures on cold and hot rolling and other goods, and China, Brazil, European Union, and Russia. These were the four main protective markets, and European Union has sort of crash landed into this list, and these countries and their destructive impact is not wanted in the markets, and that's what the global message is. And there's 355 court cases still going on, and we're expecting them to be finalized. And as I said, there seems to be a protective approach in the world, and steel industry is also going down the same route. And China actually had to do what they have done last year based on the approach from the other players in the market. Now looking at the crucial subject of market conditions, and why do market conditions keep changing so rapidly? Why do the steel prices increase? In the beginning of the year, we started from a very bad situation, from a very bad point, and the ore was up to $40, coal was up to $80, and scrap was $175. And today, ore is $75, coal $300, and scrap rate is $275. Looking at all integrated producers, their crude material, raw material production cost has increased $200 in the last few months. It's not something to be managed very rapidly. And this is the situation, this is the big picture. $200 of cost increase. So we are also doing analysis based on all these. So what happened to the market conditions when the raw material pool was so big, and we're also trying to adapt ourselves to the situation as the consumers are. And looking at the bottom left graph, it actually shows what I've been talking about. The cost in China, which you can see by the blue line, that is the raw material pool. And looking at January 2014 and July 2013 and end of 2012 was at this level. And looking at the prices of Chinese export indicators, in all these three periods, it was higher than it is right now. Okay, right now China is adopting a policy for high export, and the margin might have increased, that's okay. But then I'd like you to take a look at the graph on top right, which shows us that looking at the raw material pools, a calculation cost is pre-calculated and estimated, and obviously the Chinese managers are working on a spot approach, and we can obviously say that their current digital numbers are affected much more than ours. So then you know that there's an 8% of tax, and once we add that 8% tax, we see that we come up with actually an export cost, and that is the gold line you see for a Chinese producer. The red line below seems to be the marginal cost, which includes employment and other fixed assets or fixed numbers. So we're trying to look at where the final line of resistance is, and the sales or prices for sales are actually in between. If it can be slightly over the cost, but if it goes lower than marginal cost, it shows us that this is not sustainable, and it shows that they're actually always in the red and they're trying to cover up what's happening. And looking at the end of 2015 and the early months of 2016, Chinese producers in a period of 6 months have lived very closely to that marginal cost line. And what happened in the end? The facilities were shut down. There was a serious problem regarding supplies, and based on that supply problem or crisis, other consumers also had this problem in the other places in the world, and there was a serious increase in prices. And when we look at today, the situation is not very different. Looking at the raw material pools for today and looking at the export numbers of China, the export figures are now in close contact with the marginal cost, and the prices are on the increase, and especially for Chinese producers, they can't even save up on the cost. Well, the most important thing is raw material, and that's the increase in the raw material pool has caused all these issues. Now, I'd like to give you a chronological overview in detail. I'd like to read through this. The first thing was when China said they're going to shut down 250 million tons of capacity. And as of May the 1st, a new law showing that, or declaring that, the coal mines can actually operate for 276 days instead of 330 days. And all licensed mining production has decreased by 16%. And at the same time, the railway and truck transport numbers or fees were increased. And with the beginning of June, with these numbers, a lot of producers, such as Wales, South 32, Anglo-American, BHP, they have declared a force majeure or a recession of production. And looking at the summer in July and August, in northern China and Australia, there was some serious flooding, and obviously production also had its issues, fair share of issues there. Now, in India, the new coking batteries started to operate, and the coal supply became a serious issue because you can't actually operate an arc furnace without coal. So the European producers started panic buying, and after that, monthly, these serious increases of coal prices have happened, and it's now gone over $300. We know that the steel production has not decreased in China, but the coking coal production has decreased 14% in China. Okay, what will happen after this? This is a crucial question, and we're actually trying to follow it up as best as we can, just like you. The producers who have declared force majeure, they don't seem to go back to operation, at least until the turn of the year. And secondly, supply outside China in coal is controlled, 65% of that is controlled by one company, BHP. And it actually rapidly disrupts the supply-demand balance in the market. Well, the winter is coming, and we're expecting a cold, hard winter, and in the weather forecast it says that it's going to be one of the coldest in the last 40 years, and there's a serious pressure on China about environmental pollution, and the Chinese government have said that whatever the price increases are, we are totally decisive. We have shut down the capacities, and no new capacities will operate in the near future. And 60 million tons of coal supply is there in China right now. 60 million tons is a serious figure. there are some estimates and projections about this. So how will the 60 million ton will come back to its place in the market? We're following the analysis in the past, and such an increase based on supply recession happened back in 2011, which caused the price to go up to $390. And because of the weather conditions, there were serious problems in the Australian mines. And to go back to $220, to go back to that initial price, it took almost 1.5 years. So I'm actually sharing what we see from our previous experiences. We're going to see what we can do about this, and these are the situations, these are the conditions. It's not like we're in a theory where the increase has been speculative and the raw material costs have markedly increased in the recent few months. What about the increase in the price of ore? There was a serious supply surplus, and we saw that it was around $80. Its price was around $80, which was the last time we saw that figure was 2014. And what we can say about this is it's totally adapting itself to the market conditions. If the steel cost is increasing or the steel price is increasing, then the ore prices go up too. And as long as the steel prices are high, then the ore prices will continue running higher. Well, this new period, recently we've been talking about a lot of things. Even last week, it was mentioned that the oil prices have increased, and the Chinese government said they have actually achieved their target of shutting down their capacity, and the expectations became positive. The future markets have increased, and the oil prices have also increased based on the expectation in the future markets. And then the expectations are there. Now, what about the depth of the future markets? In the beginning of the year, the prices increased and then it rebounded. Is it the same similar period? People ask. And we're actually living through two different periods. Looking at the iron ore, the red line on the graph on the top left shows the number of contracts. How many contracts have been done in the derivatives market, and blue shows the price. And in the first quarter, when the prices went up rapidly, there was a speculative frenzy, and the numbers here are absolutely incredible. In October, for example, if you look at the month October, on the ore side you see a very low figure. And how we calculate this figure is, during October, 28 million transactions have been done. 28 million transactions. Every contract covers at least 100 tons. So the volume of the lowest contract or the lowest period was 2.8 million tons based on the transactions. So this is not just the producers, and actually individual investors actually shape this supply, and these financial instruments such as these markets are now coming to the fore. So individual investor is using these tools to invest his money in this market, and the producers have to act, have to adapt themselves back based on the investments presented to the market by individuals. So that's how then they can start looking for a buyer and then producing raw materials at the lowest cost possible. So looking at the table or the graph here, this instrument used by individual investors has now become a key part, a key cog of our lives. The difference between the first and second half here is that in the first half, the facilities that actually went in the red with the increase of the prices, the
takip etmesi
selling and
veya
buying
işte
rates
artan bir
increased, and then there was a serious increase in the ore prices.
ikinci yarıya geldiğimizde
And when we look
bir
at the
kere
second half,
çeşitli bir pozitif iyileşme dönemi var.
we
Pozitif
see a
iyileşmeye başladı.
positive recovery.
Beklentiler biraz
The
daha olumlu.
expectations are slightly
Yükselen
more
ham madde
positive.
piyasasıyla bu
The
sefer
raw
tesis ediliyor.
material market
Günkü
is now
piyasalarda böyle bir artış, bu sefer
stronger,
gelir
and in
artışını
the future
görmüyoruz.
markets we don't see
Ve
a projection of
fiyat
increase in
artışlarına
costs
nerede
or
ciddi
prices,
bir artış
and
şeyi,
despite
sinyal
this we
görmüyoruz.
don't see a signal in
Şu
the
an içinde bulunduğumuz dönem yani
increase
hiçbiri
of steel
aslında
production.
birbirine
So
benzemiyor. Bu demek
no
yani
periods, no two periods are similar to each other, and this actually should give us a message.
geçmişle
And
kıyaslamaya
we
çalışıyoruz.
always try to compare the situations
Ama
we're in
yaşadığımız hiçbir dönem
compared to the past,
yılbaşı
but
dönemi benzemiyor. Yani bir kere çok net
no
ki şu an
period that
içinde
we live
bulunduğumuz
through
dönem
actually looks
bir dönem
similar
değil.
or is same as
Nasıl
the
gerçekleşecek?
previous periods, and we can say the
Aslında
same thing
bir
for
metotla gösteriyor.
this
Yani
quarter and the
bu
first quarter of the year.
da sıklıkla
Now, when
yaptığımız
we
bir
look
gözlemde
here,
çelik fiyatlarındaki haftalık değişim
weekly changes in the
2015'e kadar
pricing of steel
haftalar
is
arasında
shown here, and with up to 2015 we were talking about a stable market, but in 2016, look here, the prices go up in a craze in one week, and the next week it hits rock bottom. There's no consistency at all, and based on the increasing dollar index and the volatility of the global financial markets, it actually causes the steel producers to act in a cautious manner, and it obviously, despite all these efforts, we can talk about a lack of balance and lack of consistency. And when I was in the college, I was in the debate team, and in that debate team that I was in, I was told it doesn't matter which team you're in, you have to support your argument. Now, looking at these figures, I remember those days, because it's very difficult to come up with an argument. We can say a lot of things that are positive about what we're going through, and we can talk about a lot of negatives. Okay, there is hope, expectations, but there's also inconsistency. For example, what about the oil prices? Is it going to increase, or is it going to continue decreasing? Okay, the oil prices are going to decrease, people say, but Russia is now on the front foot recently about this. It's going to affect the steel sector, they say. We don't know. We'll see what happens after the 30th of November. Also, the Brexit effect. Has it affected the EU? Is it gone, or actually has it started yet? We don't know. We'll just live through all these. What about the Trump effect? Yes. What will happen? Now, there's a positivity going on. US will become better. US economy will be much more stable. Dollar is going to continue on an upward trajectory. But how is it going to affect the developing countries? And how will the US manage that? We'll live through that in 2017. It's unclear. Okay, money has been printed and put to the market, and there's a serious amount of debitation in the markets. And what will happen with that? We don't know. And we know that access to information is now very easy. Something happens, and in 5 minutes, the rest of the world knows. So even before that event takes place, there are serious speculations which affect the markets. Actually, the global markets are based on expectations which increase volatility. My husband is a cardiovascular surgeon, and I showed him this in the morning, and he said, "What will you expect?" And he says, "There's a serious instability in the blood pressure, and this is a serious problem. There is high blood pressure and low blood pressure, and it's going on like that for ages." So, actually, the patient is quite happy as well, because as you always say, that you actually make money during volatility. When everything is so stable, nobody is happy. So there's actually a sort of happiness for some producers and for some consumers. So what will you do if a patient like this comes to you and he says, "All I can recommend is stress management"? Okay, if you can't manage the stress, then antidepressants, no other solution, he says. Then I thought about it. And what is the antidepressant of this market? And I couldn't really come up with something, so we have to adapt to living with these volatility, with these inconsistencies and volatility.
Tabii bunları söyleyince de yine çok
Having said all this, I have to tell you that life is 10% what you experienced and 90% how you reacted to these experiences. So yes, the markets seem to have a lot of high blood pressure, but whatever the pressure is, our and your blood pressure should be good, because we should survive. And we have to continue enjoying a healthy, dynamic life altogether, so that producers, consumers, everybody should continue living a healthy life, even if it's volatile. So I'd like to end my words by wishing you all the best health and all the best in the year 2017. Thank you very much.